American Manhunt Osama bin Laden is a new 3-part documentary series on Netflix. So today, let's see if it's worth your time. Featuring interviews with key people within the US government who helped in the global chase, the series focuses on the decade-long mission to capture one of the world's most notorious terrorists. I appreciate the structure of Netflix documentary series. They're typically 3 episodes long, almost about an hour each, and it really has that strong beginning, middle, and end to their documentary series. And when it comes to American Manhunt Osama bin Laden, the first episode is focused on the events of 9/11. The second episode is trying to find Osama bin Laden, that decade-long mission. And the third episode is that hunt for Osama bin Laden and finding him. And by doing all of that, you have that strong setup of the still very emotional event of 9/11. Seeing footage of 9/11, people that were within the government and how they reacted to it, what George Bush did that morning of 9/11, and by setting up the series with the events of 9/11, you have that whole strong purpose of the war and that manhunt for Osama bin Laden. So you started off very emotional. It's still very hard to watch, and still all that footage is devastating to see. A lot of footage within that first episode, but it sets in motion what happened for that decade-long mission, and George Bush starting the war, and then Obama taking reins and trying to find Osama bin Laden. That second episode is also very strong, where you get a lot more interviews about what it took to try to find Osama bin Laden and that decade-long mission that they had. You had a lot of interviews that people that worked with George Bush, and then a lot of people that witnessed 9/11. So you do feel a lot of very personal, emotional conversations when it comes to these interviews that Netflix is implementing into the show. And over footage of the war and 9/11, these key people within the US government are able to give a more in-depth look at what went behind closed doors in trying to find Osama bin Laden. And it's just not a handful of people. There's quite amount of people within this series that they are interviewing, and it just gives it that more personal aspect to the series. And that third episode is where it is still very gripping to see how they orchestrated the manhunt for Osama bin Laden, and then trying to be very secretive about it all. It's very intense, that third episode. First episode's emotional. The second episode's more intriguing about the war and planning everything, but it all comes forth. What the title of the Netflix series is promising is that manhunt, and then leading to them capturing Osama bin Laden. It's intense to see how they planned for it, how quick they had to prepare for it, how secretive they had to be, and the decision that Obama had to make to try to find Osama bin Laden. He took a big gamble when it came to that manhunt. So that third episode is quite intense, and they dedicate a lot of time to them raiding Osama bin Laden's house and capturing him as well. So like I said in the beginning, I appreciate the structure of these Netflix shows. You have your strong beginning, middle, and end to it. You have your setup of 9/11. Your middle half is where you dive deep into the war and trying to find Osama bin Laden. And that third episode is where you deliver that intense manhunt, the capture of Osama bin Laden. But throughout all of this, you have raw footage, you have deep, personal, emotional conversations for people from the US government that were there from the beginning of it all, and seeing reactions from a lot of people, how they perceived 9/11, what it meant to them, what the war and the manhunt for Osama bin Laden also meant to them. So it does have that very personal aspect to the show. The series is able to weave in footage, interviews, and voiceovers as well to give a very in-depth look at one of the most notorious terrorists of all time. And by setting up that strong emotional 9/11 footage and its purpose, it only made the whole series more intense as it went along. It's easy to get through these 3-part documentary shows. They never overstay their welcome. They have a nice, quick, tight pace to it all, and that's exactly the same thing for this American Manhunt Osama bin Laden series. You just get straight to the point. The pacing is perfect. You don't have a lot of moments that seem to drag. You don't have a lot of moments that is focused on one thing. You have a lot that the series needs to capture, that decade-long mission, and it focuses on key parts that have a very coherent timeline of what happened. So none of this is new. This is all things we have seen and heard before. But if you're interested in learning more about the manhunt for Osama bin Laden, I highly recommend checking out the American Manhunt series. Osama bin Laden, 3 episodes. It's straight to the point and a very brisk, quick watch. I'm gonna go ahead and give American Manhunt Osama bin Laden a B. Thank you guys for checking my review for the new Netflix documentary series, American Manhunt Osama bin Laden. Have you guys seen it by chance? What do you think about it? Let me know in the comment section down below, and stay tuned for more up and coming content like this. My name is Just Watches Movies, and you guys stay classy, YouTube.